Hello, my name's Gareth Ellis, and I have the great honour this year of working with the Poetry Society as one of the annual teacher trailblazers. I've been the library manager at Whitley Bay High School for nearly 20 years, and I've been very lucky to be able to deliver a range of poetry events and initiatives across the school and to get involved in national poetry projects and activities as well. And in recent years, I've also joined our English department, and I've been teaching English to mixed ability groups. I'm honoured to have been asked to put together a resource for teachers based on the incredible winning poems in this year's Foyle Young Poets of the Year award. In 2020, the competition received almost 16,000 poems, a staggering number, tapping into a great universe of creativity that is generated, maintained, reconfigured, redefined, and ultimately shared by young people. You can find these varied, innovative, provocative, and deeply human poems in the competition anthology You Speak in Constellations. Quite simply, essential reading for anyone who wants to engage with contemporary pulse of poetic writing or gain an insight into the future of poetry. And I can say with some confidence that judging from the anthology, that future is very bright indeed. Today I'm going to be modelling a lesson that looks at using one of the poems, My Grandmother by Prisha Jain, as a means of developing skills for approaching the unseen poem, a mainstay of many GCSE syllabi. The Foyle poems are perfect for this. They engage with ideas and themes that are not only universal and important, but which, in being chosen by young people and explored through their own eyes and experiences, offer the young people in your classroom a relatable perspective and an opportunity to explore published work produced by their own peers. You Speak in Constellations is diverse, it's deeply relevant, and hugely accessible selection of poetic voices, representing not only a bridge to the everyday experiences of your students, but an inspiration for those who might wish also to write poetry themselves. Indeed, being published only recently, exclusively in You Speak in Constellations or online on the Poetry Society website, the poem's contemporaneity guarantees their unseen credentials. By exploring these works with your students, you will find yourselves exploring not simply a brand new selection of poems, but brand new voices as well. And you will find yourself stepping into the bright lights of a brand new poetic firmament. I very much hope you enjoy this resource and get a lot of out from it to be able to inform and inspire your own teaching. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have a little look at the poem in more detail now. So this is a resource for teachers of English, and I'm going to just work through a response to the poem, exploring throughout how it might be used as practice for approaching the unseen poem at GCSE. So this is, of course, only one of many approaches that you could look at different poems, and of course different poems in the anthology as well. The film will last around 10 to 15 minutes. And of course, don't forget, you can pause it at any point to take in the information if you need a little bit more time to do that. The poem we're going to look at is My Grandmother by Prisha Jain, which of course appears in the 2020 Foyle Young Poets Anthology You Speak in Constellations. And of course, the Young Foyle Poets of the Year Award is open for entries until the 31st of July 2021. It's free to enter and is open to any young writer aged 11 to 17 years. Okay, so this is the poem we're going to look at now. As I've already mentioned, it's called My Grandmother by Prisha Jain. Absolutely fantastic piece of writing. We're going to go into quite a lot of detail about the themes and a lot of the techniques here as well. But first, we're going to listen to Prisha performing the poem herself.
My name is Prisha Jain, and this is my poem, My Grandmother. My grandmother wears silk saris, woven with soft threads from India, stained with rich indigo dye. Tiny peacocks perch in the folds, and flecks of gold adorn them like jewels, sparkling with every movement. A red bindi sits between her brows. She's a queen, but in Tesco, she's an obscurity in the spice aisle. My grandmother has silver hair, plaited in intricate patterns, with garlands of yellow marigolds tucked into the strands, accompanied with a sprinkling of sweet-smelling jasmine flowers. The marriage of the sun and moon. But in Sainsbury's, she's an oddity amongst the frozen chapatis. My grandmother speaks in Hindi, the language of saffron mangoes and fragrant blushing lotuses. It flows like the Ganga, with praises like honeyed rose petals, and even the stinging cusses, like a biting Karela, sounds like a nightingale song. But her broken English in Morrison's reduces her to suspicious looks at the pickle shelf.
So the first thing I would encourage students to do, of course, is to read the poem, or of course, if you can, to actually hear the poet perform it is a wonderful, wonderful experience. So first thing, we'd read the poem. But what I would suggest here is that we'd read the poem 3 times in 3 different ways. The first would be to hear it, so either the teacher would read it out loud, or if you've got the recording of the poet, then that could be played there. The second process, the second part of the reading would be read again, but with a pen. And this is where we go through the poem and we just start to circle or underline what we like, what we find interesting. We don't have to necessarily understand the poem in inverted commas yet. This is more of an instinctual response, and we're highlighting what appeals, what stands out, or what sticks in our mind. And then the third process for reading would be reading again with a question. So this is where we can generate a question ourselves, or students can do that on their own, or teachers could have one in mind that they would like to have students to look at. So for example, why do you think the poet repeats "my grandmother" at the beginning of each stanza? So with a question, we read again, and it just focuses in our response to that poem. Again, though, it is a reading process at this stage. We're reading the poem, we're really engaging with the text. So the next thing we might like to do is then start thinking about getting off the ground by noticing facts, just by noticing things, just by making some true observations. So what can we say about the poem that is true for our first reading? So let's pool our observations, we might say. Let's share one true thing about the poem, but it must be different from what other people have shared. So that gets us away from the kind of, oh, well, I agree with him or I agree with her. This is an opportunity for all students to have their say here. And at this stage, all contributions, providing that they can be said to be true, are valid, valuable, and equal. And this hopefully will generate a variety of responses from the likes of the very observable, it has 3 stanzas, absolutely fantastic, to the insightful, it juxtaposes the richness of Indian culture and references with the mundanity of everyday supermarket names. So we're going to have a range, hopefully, of observations here, and they're going to range in depth and detail there. But they're all, as I say, valid, valuable, and equal at this stage. So then at the end of this process, we might have, here's quite a few different responses then. Very true things that we can say about this poem: rich adjectives, plosive alliteration, it mentions birds, we've got sibilance, it mentions foods, we've got powerful imagery, so lots of different responses there. And then we might ask our students then, well, can we rank these? Can we at least choose what we think are the 5 most interesting or insightful observations that we as a class have pulled together? Why have we chosen these? And then let's extrapolate and discuss why these particular aspects have stood out to us. So this is again a very sort of discussion-based response to the poem, looking at all the different ideas that the students have generated themselves. So the next stage then might be to think about moving on by noticing ideas. So we've noticed true observable facts. We're now going to think about noticing ideas. So how would we describe the themes of the poem, perhaps? If you had to, what would you say the poem was about? And this is when we start looking at maybe ideas that may be generated that look like this. So we might be talking about ideas like isolation or experience or language. We might think about communication, society, modern life, politics, social comment, all these different sort of things that might be generated about that poem, ideas from that poem. So again, same process. Can we rank these? Can we at least choose what we think are the 5 most interesting or insightful observations? And then why have we chosen these? Again, let's extrapolate once more and discuss why these have stood out to us. So this gives us 2 strands now. We've now got observable truths and we've got some themes. So this is a question now of bringing these 2 strands of our initial thinking together. So we're bringing 2 things together, a little bit like this marriage of the sun and moon that Prisha talks about in her poem. We're bringing these 2 different things together and we're merging them, we're marrying them to hopefully create some kind of really interesting observable point. So we're going to choose one of the facts that we've observed or ranked, and then we're going to choose one of the themes that we've observed. And then the task is, students can do this on their own, or again, it could be a classroom discussion, it could be a pair activity, it could be group activity, depending on how you would like to use that in the classroom. This is now we now need to start making links between the observable facts and the themes. How does one impact on the other? How does one impact on 2? So what we might do in this situation is we might say, for example, pick the idea of the repetition of my grandmother. And then we might think about this theme of culture. And then we might therefore be able to make the point, well, the repetition of my grandmother suggests an engagement with the vibrant culture she represents. So we might be able to make quite a simple, straightforward response to the poem in that particular way there. And that's a lovely way to really get the thinking off the ground and really get students thinking about not just the themes, not just the facts, but how they all interplay and how form and structure and language create meaning here. But of course, we're talking about the unseen here. So what might be useful is to start thinking about a question, because of course, if we can really link this into a question that might work or might be very similar to one a student might come face to face with at GCSE, then this is going to be a really valuable process for them. So here's a question that we've generated in advance. In My Grandmother, how does the poet present the figure of the grandmother? And of course, alternatively, students could generate their own question, or it could be developed as a class discussion. And the things we're wanting to get out of our response to this are these three critical ideas here. The key three things that we need to do when we're approaching the unseen is we need to respond critically to the text, we need to make a reference to the text, and of course, we need to think about how language, form, and structure are creating meaning. So now we need to do a bit of critical analysis. So this is the point where we might like to start building on our initial observations with some more detailed analysis, always ensuring that we're keeping our question in mind. And there's the question there on the screen to remind us again of that. So let's bring back the poem and let's start highlighting things. So the first one we might do is we might bring in this lovely repetition of grandmother. We might again make a point that perhaps that establishes some kind of focus in the text. We may also pick out the fact there's fantastic use of colours here. We've also got some really rich adjectives, which I've highlighted there in green. We may also have this circling of powerful imagery and thinking about how these really fantastic phrases are working together to create this wonderful evocation of this character. And of course, we've got wonderful similes here as well. We've got a double simile there as well, haven't we, in that third stanza? So we've got lots and lots of fantastic imagery going on here. And then once we've done that, we can maybe think about how that creates a layered, detailed, and evocative description of my grandmother, developing a highly sensual and almost hyper-realized depiction of a loved one. So we're making our observations, but we're going back also to what the effects of these are all the time. We're marrying those two ideas back together all the way through. We've also got this reference to supermarkets all the way through, and we've got this sense of the exotic versus the mundane. And this effectively is a juxtaposition of cultural aspects used to create startling observation regarding social integration. So these might be the kind of observations we're making and then the kind of inferences we're making as a result of them. So we're doing a bit of analysis now and really getting to grips with what the impact of these particular language choices might be. So once we've done that, we're in a far better position now to start thinking about what our answer to that question might be. So let's have a look at that question again. In My Grandmother, how does the poet present the figure of the grandmother? Well, looking at the top now, we've basically pulled out loads of observations and we've pulled out what the effects of those observations are as well, which puts us in a great position now to start making a really interesting point. In My Grandmother, the poet presents the grandmother as a beautiful figure and a powerful representation of a vibrant culture. She emphasizes the importance of the grandmother by repeating the phrase, my grandmother, at the beginning of each of the three stanzas. This establishes her as the main focus of the poem. Furthermore, the poet uses a range of techniques to evoke the figure of the grandmother and to enable the reader to visualize her. She uses colors and rich adjectives to create not only a sense of the person, but of her culture and heritage. And we see this in etc., etc. This is where we bring in our well-chosen quotations here. And interestingly, the poet makes reference to British supermarkets, drawing on their ubiquitous and mundane presence to make a point about the social and racial integration. We see this where, and then we again populate that with some fantastic quotes. So what have we done here? Well, we've responded critically to the text, we've made reference to the text, and of course we've thought about how language, form, and structure create meaning as well. But maybe we can go a little bit further than that. Can we deepen our observations here? And maybe can we find something new? Can we find something unique? And this is when we're going to now start pushing our students a little bit. So we've got two options here. We can think about going that little bit further and deepening our already made observations, which I've got on the left-hand side of the screen there, or maybe we can think about finding something new. Can we find something unique? Can we really push our analysis into the realms of the upper grades at GCSE there? So maybe we might make observations about the three parts. Can we say something interesting about the three verbs used about my grandmother, where, has, speaks? Can we say something interesting about each of the three words used in the last lines of each stanza, like obscurity, oddity, or suspicious? And in terms of the similes, maybe we can say something interesting about the double simile in the lines, the stinging cusses, etc., etc. So can we start linking those back to some really developed, detailed points? Or alternative, can we find something completely new? We hadn't observed in the initial pooling of ideas that I demonstrated before, that I modelled before, this idea of the lack of capital letters. Can we say something interesting about the lack of capital letters on some words, but then the presence of them on others? What does this say about the status and importance of the words? English, India, Sainsbury's, Tesco, Morrison's, they've all got capital letters, but Hindi does not. Can we infer anything from this at all? And what about those last words of the stanzas? Can we say something interesting about the phrases spice aisle, frozen chapatis, and pickle shelf? Is something being said about the packaging of cultures for the satisfaction of safety for potentially hostile society? So can we now start building our argument and building our ideas in really exciting and deep ways? To finish which, I'm just going to offer you 5 different ideas for different aspects of a lesson. So maybe if you're thinking about using this poem in terms of a starter, how would you use it? Well, maybe you'd think about using the title as a mirror into your own life. Thinking only about the title, what would this poem say if it had been written by you? What would be the first line? Or maybe for engagement, could you draw the poem? If you had to replicate the poem visually, what would you do? Would you pick out only one key image, and which one would it be and why? Or would you seek to represent the poem's themes visually? What about for creativity? Could you find another voice? Is there another voice that you can explore in the poem? Can you write something, a piece of creative writing, in the grandmother's voice, imagining her feelings and her experiences? Or what about this for challenge and extension? Think like the poet. Why has the poet chosen to write this poem? Why do you think this poem needed to be written? What is the poet's intention? All questions that can be given to students, all questions that can be developed and offered to students as classroom discussion or for their written work. And finally, as a lesson ending, as you leave the class, tell the teacher the one key aspect of the poem that has stuck with you. Will you be able to remember this feature next lesson? Why does it resonate so much? I very much hope that's been useful for you. And don't forget, of course, that students can enter the Foyle Young Poets of the Year award at the following site on screen. Thank you very much.